I serve as CEO and Executive Director of Atlas School. We are a vocational school focused on software engineering training. We have some students here, some alumni here tonight, which is very special. But tonight we want to talk to you about Equal Pay Day. And to give you just a little bit of framing, I think that there is nothing more depressing than going to a women's event and having everyone on stage tell you how hard it is to be a woman in tech, and then the panel ends and we all leave and go home. And our hope for tonight is that certainly want to be honest about the state of affairs and be honest about challenges, but instead want to focus on opportunities for encouragement, opportunities for you all to be inspired by the three women that we have here tonight. And we'll actually close out with Megan talking a little bit about negotiation tactics. So really trying to give you something tangible to walk away with that you can take with you into your life in an effort to do our best to help close the pay gap. So we're thrilled that you're here. I want to kick off by having our panelists introduce themselves. So we'll just go down the line. If you'll share your name, the organization that you represent, or multiple organizations you represent, and then what is your favorite thing about working in and around the sector that you're in? I guess everyone is in or adjacent to tech.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Libby.
You may have to turn your mic on.
There you go. Check 1, 2. Okay. Well, thank you for that, Libby. My name is Sahi Abdulmomin, and I am the Senior Associate on the Virtual Health Portfolio at Tulsa Innovation Labs. So I work at the intersection of healthcare, technology, and health equity. What I love most about my job is being able to work at an ecosystem level, survey the landscape, understand where there are gaps, and create opportunities for equitable growth within the health tech industry here in Tulsa.
Very cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Valerie Nierenberg, and I'm a solutions architect at a digital analytics company called Quantum Metric. And I also volunteer on the board of directors for Oklahoma Women in Technology. And I am a graduate of Holberton School, now Atlas School. And my favorite thing about being in tech is that every day is different. I love the new challenge and kind of never knowing everything.
Hi, my name is Megan Radford. I know a lot of you in the audience. Hello. And I lead our general education here at Atlas. What that is the career development and anything that's not tech related. So think project management even can fit into that. But also resume building, cover letters, negotiations, which we'll talk about tonight, as well as how to network and all of those wonderful things where they get to interact with these folks on the stage. Something that I've really enjoyed about the tech industry and what brought me to Holberton before Atlas was just the ever-changing and the growth around the tech industry. Not only just the abilities that it gives people, but also just like how fun and creative it can be. After COVID, I was stuck in a cubicle, and it was a little hard after a while. So I was really excited to start here. And something that I've really enjoyed about my position here and being tech adjacent is really Atlas giving anyone in Tulsa and their surrounding areas the ability to learn tech and come into an industry with so much more potential than they had previously. I just had my first offer letter conversation of the trimester today, so I'm in very good mood, and it was very exciting. So I just love that opportunity that we can give to students.
Megan, since we have ended on you on the line, I know that you pulled a little bit of research and some more up-to-date numbers on the pay gap, where we stand not only as women, but with other marginalized communities. Would you mind sharing some of what you found?
Absolutely. So they are a little sad, but as Libby said, we are going to talk through some things that can help us as a community grow through these hurdles that, have been put in place. So, overall, U.S. women make 84 cents to the dollar of men, so it's actually 2 cents up, woohoo, go us, from last year. So that's something, but we still have a ways to go. And they keep getting lower, so just be aware of these things in your everyday lives and be an advocate for these people. Black women make 69 cents per dollar of white men. Indigenous women make 51%, and Hispanic women make 57% of what a white man would make. Specifically in tech, it is a lot better. Typically, you have a higher salary overall in tech, so it's awesome. I only found numbers for Hispanic and Black women, so I'm not 100% sure on Indigenous women, but for Hispanic women, it is 92%, and Black women, it is at 90%. So that is better in the tech industry, but we still have a ways to go. For Asian women and Pacific Islander women, that number is up to 99%. So significantly different based on race even, not even against white women. Women, compared to their from last year, white women in the tech industry made 94 and now are making 95% of what men are making. I also want to, I think it's a very important note, especially since we're an educational facility, that the majority of women are getting degrees and going to further their education than are men. And a really interesting statistic, Black women hold 64.1% of bachelor's degrees, 71.5% of master's, and 65.9% of doctoral, medical, and dental. So they are going for the highest possible potential and still making less in this industry. It's crazy, right? I have a few more. So for our trans and non-binary folks, they fit into this because without female voices, you can't have voices for these people. So I think it's important. So trans men make 70% of what a cisgendered white male will make. Trans women make 60%. Women that are LGBTQIA make 87%, non-binary 70%, and men in LGBTQIA are 96%. So they're even affected by this, and I think that's important to show as well. A few more, sorry. We don't have to do it later if we do it now. So just for reference, if you think salary-wise, because these numbers might be like, okay, well, that number doesn't really make sense in my brain. So in 2022, the average salary for men was $53,000. That's across everything, not tech, but so it is low overall because salaries need to come up in general. And then women, the average is $40K, so under $10,000. So if a man makes $60,000, a white woman would make $50,400. Black woman would make $41,000. Indigenous would make $30,000, and a Hispanic woman would make $34,000. And I think that covers it. Oh, yeah, I did. Good. There we go. So for our men, specifically our cisgendered white males in the room, please be aware of these numbers if you are here. It's very important to advocate for people, and that's something we will continue to talk about.
I'd like to start there. One of the largest contributing factors to the gender pay gap is unconscious bias. We know that there are bad actors in the world that may consciously be deciding to pay underrepresented communities less, but we know that so often it is systems and unconscious bias that have been put in place. I'd love to start with really any of our panelists. When you hear unconscious bias, what does that mean to you, and why do you think it's become such a prevalent and vicious part of this problem that we're grappling with?
Yeah, I think one thing that we all need to acknowledge is that the unconscious part of the unconscious bias, it's not necessarily malicious. People aren't always going, hey, she's a black woman and I just want to pay her, 60 cents on the dollar for what I pay her white male equivalent or what have you. But it is as subtle as, I can't pronounce that name, right? Like I get a resume and I can't pronounce that name and I'm gonna dismiss it, right? Or this person may not necessarily dress or look the way that the rest of the people in our office looks. And so those aren't necessarily inherently racist thoughts that come about, but the impact that it has is then disadvantaging certain communities. And so what I would want to challenge people to do, especially as you grow in your career and you come into positions where you can make those decisions, be conscious of the people that look and sound different than you. Be conscious of even, some hiring practices. I forget, I saw a statistic the other day around how most jobs these days, like the postings are going up, but the company already has who they want to hire in mind before they put the job up. People are hiring who they know before they survey the qualifications. And so yes, it may be tempting to hire Mark, who I've known for years, but for the sake of equality and equity, consider holding those judgments and being able to survey the experiences before you pass judgment on exactly what candidate you want to bring on.
Yeah, I think, another way unconscious bias comes into play is people having kind of favoring some traits that are traditionally associated with masculinity. Assertiveness is a huge, example of that. Also kind of direct communication, even just confidence in general. All of these are really beneficial in the setting of a negotiation conversation or even just in our corporate world in general. But when women display some of these traits, they can be viewed negatively and it can actually be a detriment to their advancement. So I think just being aware of that as well is important.
Yeah, and I think that it comes down to putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Like, it goes back to empathy, like the most basic childhood trait, like children start out and don't know any of this, right? It's wonderful. They just get to be friends with whoever the heck they want, and then we someday tell them, no, you can't be friends with them because of X, Y, and Z. And making sure that you are continuing to put yourself in their shoes, think about their thoughts and ideas, and also just like asking them, go be, popular person in the group, but you should put yourself in those places so that you can hear the things that those people are going through, so that you can speak out for them when you are in those meetings or when you're the only one in the C-suite. You're the only voice they have at that point. So making sure that you can kind of unlearn those unconscious biases that unfortunately are going to happen just how we're raised.
And just one more thing I want to add is a little hack for checking, because you don't have to wait until you are in a position of leadership to be able to create a more welcoming workspace and environment. But something that I like to do whenever I recognize, and sometimes recognizing it is hard, but recognizing that I have even a slightly negative perception of an interaction, I put myself in the habit of questioning, well, why do I feel that way? Well, why did I not like her tone? Maybe, is it because I expect women to communicate in a certain style? Why did I, and continuing to ask yourself that, and it was like, maybe that is just how that person expresses themselves. And if it were a different position, or if it was my boss, male or female, would I have perceived it a little bit differently? And so sort of continuing to interrogate and ask yourself these very important questions as you are forming opinions and feelings about those that you work with, to continually making sure that you're not contributing to the problem, because again, it's unconscious bias, it's never conscious.
And I love that, because again, my hope for our audience today is to be able to take away things, practices and attitude that can go into practice. We all have a role to play, not just in hiring, but in welcoming and building an environment where everyone can feel welcome and can thrive. I'll make a quick plug. If you are a manager, one of the best ways for you to check that bias is by writing down how your interview process goes, how your offer letter process goes, and going back and reflecting on what you've done in the past. It was through that process that in my last role at another company realized that we had one team member negotiate for us to do a relocation bonus, and the candidate in front of us was a young woman. She was not negotiating for that, and so we weren't going to offer it until we went back and saw, wait a second, we have given this to a candidate before, and it is fair and equitable for us to go ahead and offer it to the next candidate. And we wouldn't have necessarily remembered that 18 months later if we hadn't been diligent about reflecting and writing down. I'd love to turn to you all for resources and support systems you believe exist or that you've leveraged that can help women be equipped with these skills, be it confidence or the actual networking and negotiation skills. And maybe Valerie, we can start with you.
Oh, yes. I would love to talk about this subject because it gives me the opportunity to talk about OK Wit, which some of you maybe visit our booth or hit us up after. But OK Wit is a nonprofit whose mission is to bridge the gap between genders in STEM fields. And our 4 founders created the organization because they so often, like many of us, found themselves as the only woman in the room. And but the reason I think that OK Wit is such a great resource is because there's just all these different initiatives and different angles, and it's something for everyone, regardless of where they are in their journey. We have educational and scholarship opportunities for young women to encourage them to get into STEM fields. There's professional development, networking, and speaking opportunities for professionals working in STEM fields, and then mentorship and leadership for those that are looking to take the next step into leadership roles. And it was an organization that was a great community for me to get into as I was transitioning from a background in nonprofits into the tech industry. And I think as women, one of our greatest resources is each other and continuing to uplift each other. And the last thing I'll say is that I think equally as important is our partnerships that we have, that OK Wit has with the community and with our allies and with corporate sponsors and community partners, because we can't really do anything in a vacuum. And so we need help from others to really succeed and move the needle.
Yeah, so whenever I have a background in human resources, so I did a lot of hiring. I hired our first software engineer at my company, and that was a big deal. I mean, I was very excited to finally see that move, and making sure that now that I was in HR and we were starting the ball rolling, that we were connecting with the colleges that had those organizations established already. So obviously, like Women in STEM in a college organization or an outside organization have always been helpful in like a hiring role, as well as like they have Latinos for like STEM programs. I know TU does. They have tons of others. I'm sure OSU and OU have them as well. So if you're hiring, always go for that option and plug into those organizations. They want you there, absolutely 100%. And a lot of folks will have like women organizations as well if you're looking for like business specifically. But something that like personally I found was like the finance realm is very male dominated, and I wanted to feel comfortable talking about finance with anybody really, but especially with men around me, because I think that that's something that you're not really taught in school, of how to like do stocks and all of that fun stuff. I'm not a pro, but I'm learning. But I do learn from a lot of women and a lot of people of color as well. Popcorn Finance, if you like podcasts, he's amazing and has the best voice ever, honestly. But they're like quick snippets, so if you like it, go for it. But just like getting enthralled with it, reading books by women who have gone through this and done all the research is extremely beneficial. And now I have the ability to make sure that we have those resources here for our students, because we do have a large women and large population of people of color at Atlas. And I want to make sure that everyone, because you don't get it in high school here usually either. So I want to make sure that we can do that not only on a personal level, but for a larger scale for people going out into Tulsa and having those conversations.
Resources that immediately come to mind, one being when I first joined Tulsa Innovation Labs, my manager, now director, during the first week on the job, she was like, you have to read this book. The book is called Never Split the Difference. Yes, it's a great resource. There are a million Spark Notes, videos, TikToks that break it down. So if you don't read the book, you can still get the information. Literally just type in Never Split the Difference and it will come up. But that was a great that was a great resource for me to really understand how to negotiate and why I should feel comfortable and confident negotiating. And then sort of piggybacking off of the podcast recommendation, because I think it is important. You do feel more confident when you sort of understand the macro trends that are happening within the tech industry and happening within finance across the country. The podcast Pivot has been one of my favorites for quite some time. They talk a lot about everything tech, AI, finance, and how government and policy can also affect that. So having the resources and the tools to understand what's going on at a macro level, I think really does a lot to help boost your confidence when you are having those conversations and having those negotiations.
I know your director and can just picture her saying, "This is homework. You must read this book now." But that brings up a good point. There's often a difference between someone who is mentoring you or coaching you and the term sponsor. So in the workforce, a sponsor is someone who's willing to say your name in rooms that you're not in, is willing to go to bat for you, to advocate for you. How do you think about building both the mentorship and the sponsorship component in the workplace? And what advice would you have for our audience?
I would say I have one mentor, and he really pushed me in the last 2 years to build my personal advisory board. And these are folks that are 3 years ahead of me, 10 years ahead of me, 15 years ahead of me. And having that diversity in seniority, I think, is very important to help you navigate as you progress in your career. But some tips that I gained along the way on my journey of building my personal advisory board is put yourself out there, go to these events. You may not know anyone, you may have to go alone, it may be a little bit awkward, but push yourself out of your comfort zone and speak to someone. You never know who you're gonna run into. Find groups that align with your interest on LinkedIn, and start reaching out to folks on LinkedIn. You'd be really surprised as to how many people are willing to give you career advice just because they are, 10, 15 years ahead, or maybe even 3 years ahead in a career that you would like to, and building those connections before you are on the job search and job hunt is extremely meaningful, because when they're already primed. They know, and when you see an opportunity at the company that you want to work at, a year in, 6 months in, whatever, you've already have that personal connection in that in. Those would be the two main ones. And one that I very recently learned is trying to find conferences that align with what you're interested in. Conferences can be really expensive, and sometimes it's hard to be able to get the funds to do that. But if you can somehow figure out the travel, a lot of the times the conferences will take volunteers, and they will grant you access to the conferences because you are helping them set up XYZ on day one, and then you get a full conference pass. I know a lot of friends that take advantage of that, and it's been meaningful to them. So I hope that comes in handy for you guys one day as well.
Great. We're going to turn to Megan here in a moment and have her share some tips and tricks for negotiating. So this is for our other two panelists. How do you all think about negotiating? What resources have you leveraged in the past? And really, why does it matter for us to be able to close the pay gap?
So I would say a few of the resources that have worked really well for me. One is leveraging data, not just in the sense of salary benchmarks and kind of market rates, but also creating or quantifying your accomplishments and the things that you've done and framing it in terms of data that relates to business goals of your company. And it helps you separate that from yourself. It can be hard as women to talk about our accomplishments and kind of pitch ourselves. And so I think that's something that has helped me is, just talking about the data. It doesn't lie. This is what I've done. And it makes it a lot more of a comfortable conversation. I would also say in those conversations, like tactically, role playing beforehand and practicing with someone is very helpful. It can feel like public speaking when you're doing a review conversation, and that can bring a lot of nerves. So I think just practicing with a trusted colleague or friend I help out with a young professionals group at my company, and we kind of paired people up to do this leading up to our review, and it was really helpful to some people just across the company on different roles to kind of get that external perspective before in practice. And then finally, I would say mentorship as well, having advocates and mentors that are saying your names in those rooms and giving you those opportunities really has been helpful. And for me, that has been both women and men. And so it's very important, regardless of gender, that these people in leadership positions help open doors for us.
When it comes to negotiation tactics, I think one, being prepared, like even if it's the first interview, have that market research done, understand what people in your segment for that role would typically be paid, what they would be paid on a national level, but also in that state and in that geography. Sort of doing that work on the front end is really important. And then tip number 2 is, once you know what your target number is, you have that data, you understand people make around X dollars, X $1,000 a year, or whatever it is, when you're going to the negotiation, sort of plan ahead that they're going to talk you down, and overshoot just a little bit. Always like padding a little bit has come in handy for me personally, and I hear it's worked for a few of my peers as well. So that's another tip that I would give the audience.
I love that. If you're in an organization where you use Microsoft Teams or Slack or any kind of instant communication, a lot of times you can use those to set up a reminder to yourself. So having a bot remind you every 2 to 4 weeks to write down your own accomplishments also helps build over the arc of your 6-month review or your 1-year review, to be able to then go quantify those accomplishments every time you have an opportunity to make that ask. So that'd be my advice. Megan, because this is a subject that you teach on literally, we would love, I think I have a clicker here.
We do. Yeah.
We'll pass
We have slides.
that down. Maybe.
Should be right after. There. That's mine.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll pass that down to
Thank
Megan.
you. Hopefully it reaches. It's been misbehaving, so we'll see if it does what we need. All right, I'm going to stand for this one so you can see everything and so I can see. So this is from Andrea Schneider. Basically, how do we tear down these predetermined things that we've already talked about today about ourselves and others for folks that might be hiring in the room? Oh no, it might not work. That's okay. Can someone click the computer for me? That's from Atlas. Thank you. Not just a random person, sorry. It has lots of animations, so there we go. So first we have assertiveness. Go ahead and do the next one. Empathy, flexibility, social intuition, and ethicality. Thank you. Sorry, I almost said ethnicity, and I was like, that is not the word that's on the screen. Okay, assertiveness. We'll start there. Go ahead and click for me. Thank you. So this is the only one that we are seeing as having lesser ability on, but I disagree because we can definitely still be assertive. There's always a nice way to be assertive, right? Like you're not going to go in screaming at people like some other people do sometimes, but so making sure that you have your point of view and you understand it fully and what you're asking before you're going in. And having the verbal ability to stand up and make those arguments, figuring out what tactics that person is using versus what tactics you need to use are very important here because they could be coming in extra assertive, so you don't necessarily want to meet them with that hot of a head, but you do need to go in and know what you know, like Valerie was saying, here are the statistics that I have, and the things that I've done, and making sure that you are bringing that to the table, and that's where that assertiveness is. Like you can prove that you have done the things that they've asked in order to get a raise. Next is empathy. This is really easy for us, right? So this is making sure that you can understand the other side and where they're coming from. So obviously there's always a wonderful budget, so you have to keep that in mind, right? We can't all make $1 million. I really wish we could. But making sure that you understand, like if you are, you know, a middle manager, understanding where the health of your team is. Are we growing? Are we on a pause? Those type of things. And how long, you know, your manager's been in the role. Are they trying to understand things still? And just trying to put yourself in their shoes, even though it's a little bit harder to do because you're like, I deserve this, but taking a step back a little bit and making sure that you are in your emotions, but also feeling a little bit on theirs as well. Next, we have flexibility. So making sure the outcome and process flexibility to find different ways to get what you want. Not any scientific difference here. Men and women are equally flexible in the workplace here. So just remembering to be understanding and adjust your negotiation as the other person is also negotiating. But both folks can do that. Social intuition, making sure that you're building rapport with your negotiator. Again, you don't want to go in with such a hot head that they're just immediately no. This is based on a relationship that you've already had with your manager or, any other negotiation, right? You could be negotiating with HR. It's not necessarily your manager, but making sure that you are reading their verbal and nonverbal cues. Like if we need to take a break, obviously that's something to go back to your empathy and remember. And then also mirroring them. Again, we like similar people to ourselves. So if you can try to mirror them as much as possible, that will make them more likely to be on your side because now you are doing some behaviors similar to them so they can kind of associate you with them. We have lizard brains too sometimes. Ethicality refers to your reputation and trustworthiness. Our social capital is very high. We build relationships, and this is a very large strength here for us. This is something, like I said earlier, making sure that you are aware of the relationship and the emotions that you are bringing into this meeting, because this is going to have a very high emotional interaction with both parties. Thank you. All right, so creating confidence. Finding your special KSAs, which are knowledge, skills, and abilities. These are things that you're bringing in from previous experience or if you've been in a role for a while. You can also use these if you've shifted around in the company quite a bit. So these are things like Valerie was saying that you've taken into account. So maybe you're coming newly into the tech field, my students, we've already talked about this a little bit, but bringing in the things that you've done in previous roles and how they can equivocate to things in the tech world, because I promise you, they 1000% do. If you've worked with customer service, you have a lot of skills that are going to be transferable into this world. I won't let us take too much time here, but in your own time, you should definitely take a few minutes to list out some things that you can use to negotiate, like things that you've done or just who you are as a person and what you're bringing to a team. So let's say you help out on teams quite a bit and, it's not necessarily in your job description, but you're clicking keys for me while you're over there. Little things like that do add up, and it really does change the emotions and the effect of your team. If you're willing to help people, they're going to trust you more, and trust goes such a long way in these situations. If your manager knows that they can trust you, you're probably more likely to get a higher salary than someone that they can't trust, because they're more likely to tell you things in confidence. They're going to give you cooler projects, like more fun things that you get to do, because they're like, I know it will get done because Kristen's on it, Sorry, I'm picking on you because, you're here. So here are some questions you can ask yourself. What sets you apart from others? What are you bringing to the table that is missing? This is a really big one that I like to have students ask in interviews. So what is missing on your team? What do you want this role to bring? That is such a good question. But also in your one-on-ones, you should ask these questions. Where do you step in when others might ignore things? What are you doing outside of your job description? What trainings or professional development have you done? And what is that adding to the team? So let's say if you get, Agile, Scrum Master certification, how is that adding to the projectile of your career? Thank you. All right, this has a lot of animations too. I apologize, Kristen. Go ahead and click. Sorry, not yet. There we go. Step 1, we're gonna research, as Valerie said. Part of this is asking. It is not illegal to ask about other people's salary, according to the National Labor Relations Act, okay? You can go look it up. There are some roles that it is illegal because there's certain things, but it's like agriculture workers, railroad workers. Some of you might, I don't know, but go see if you are part of those groups. But this is wonderful to do, especially asking your male counterparts, because as we saw, there are some sketchy things going on. So always ask. And also, folks, sorry, I'm used to talking to them, so it's fun, you know? So men in the room, be willing and open to have those conversations. Initiate those conversations because it's so uncomfortable to ask them, you know? And then a few resources I like are salary.com and ONET. These are wonderful because they show you specific to like a junior role. Obviously there's Bureau of Labor Statistics, but that's like software engineer, anybody that has that title, and it's like so skewed. So take it with a grain of salt. Those are wonderful resources. Next, please. Step 2, prepare and take notes. What have you done? Like we said on the last one, and you were awesome and you hit the nail on the head. Rehearse. Practice with people. Do it in a mirror or just record yourself on your computer or phone. It's so much less awkward if you try to do it now so you can see how nervous you're going to be. And then it will be a little tiny bit easier whenever you actually do the thing. Next, please. Schedule a specific meeting time, or if salary negotiations or salary increases are not part of that time, you need to be the one that's setting up a specific meeting for that conversation, and giving them time to prep and like obviously have all of their ducks in a row, and you also want time to prep. And then next, ask for a number, or you can ask for a range as well. If you're going into a job interview, something wonderful that I saw from, can't remember who on LinkedIn, but it was great. He said to, if they ask for a number, you say, I'm interviewing for jobs with this range. That way it's not necessarily what you are wanting, but I'm interviewing at other companies that want to offer me this range. So it puts it on the companies and it makes them fight it out. It's really fun. And then don't beat around the bush, get to the point. This is what I'm asking for. It's that assertiveness that men are bringing into the room, and we also want to bring that into the room. This is what I want. This is on the table. Let's talk about it. And then right behind you, Valerie, sorry, is ask yourself, what would a man do? Remember, just always go with that, okay?
I don't know about that
If they would do it, just do it, okay? And then lastly here in step 5, leveraging the offer. Express your loyalty and show how excited and passionate. Obviously, if you're not, like, maybe you should start looking at other jobs. But if you were passionate about what you're doing and you love the company, show your loyalty to them because that will stick out to them. Again, it's the trust part of it. If you want to stay with me and I want to stay with you and you're doing a good job, then I probably need to reward you with some form of a compensation, whether it's salary or extra PTO or whatever insert thing you want here. And then here you can see is like a little quote, can you level with me on my future prospects at this company? This is something Barbara from Shark Tank said. I thought it was a great quote. I love her. She's very assertive. Be like Barbara. What would Barbara do? Okay? Really just ask that. But so making sure that you can get to where you want to go. So if they say, sorry, there's no salary increase right now, great. What do I need to do in order to get that the next performance review? Things to be aware of. So wording, avoid words that will undermine your argument, i.e. believe, feel like, just, only, maybe, might. These are words that are less impactful. They're not as assertive as we mentioned. So make sure you try to avoid those. Again, coming with rehearsing. Body posture. Fidgeting or no eye contact will only create distraction for your question and you will seem less prepared. Again, just the rehearsal part, it's very awkward to look at someone's eyes, but you can just look in the middle of their forehead and it'll be so much easier, I promise. And also remember, you know this person, they've probably done it too. And if you are in the room with a woman, then it's hopefully a little bit more comfortable with them. But remembering that you can always like take a break, bring water with you or something if you need to like have something to do in that time. And then giving a purpose. A lot of times, men don't go in with a purpose, really. They're just like, give me more money. I mean, that's not like that, but it's pretty much like that. Mostly women will go down rabbit holes of, oh, I need it because I have a new house, or I have a kid, or I have a car, or whatever, insert thing. Women, also a statistic, after COVID, they had to leave the workforce, like more so than men. So making sure that you are not necessarily going in to give a purpose other than here are all the wonderful things that I do for this company. Let's talk about my salary. Wonderful.
Thank you, Megan.
You're welcome.
We are going to open it up to the audience for any Q&A that you might have.
We love questions. Oh, yes.
So earlier in the panel discussion, kind of we mentioned a little bit about, I think implicit bias is a good word for that. I guess as a business owner and someone that's kind of creating a culture right now, I guess I'll give an example. So kind of in corporate America, kind of consulting, for example, a lot of times there's this kind of like toxic bro culture, right? And kind of going out and kind of partying and things like that, and it's like very ingrained in that culture. And I kind of would agree, I don't think it's necessarily insidious, but it kind of excludes people in a lot of ways. What kind of things can we do to maybe shift the culture or create a culture that is more welcoming for everyone?
One of the things that we've put into practice for our staff is just asking what they would like to do. We have money set aside for team fun. It is explicitly not like team building. It's not necessarily like go do trust exercises or things that are very corporate in nature. I mean, it is let's get out of the workplace. Let's do something that's enjoyable. And a couple times a year, we ask people, what kind of fun do you want to have? And it allows us to, instead of being prescriptive about what one person or a couple of people want to do, it opens it up. And because of that, yes, we've done the drinking on the bike bar, which was very fun around downtown. But we've had teams go build terrariums and do the painting classes. We went bowling as a whole staff just 2 weeks ago. The other thing you can do, again, if you're in management, if you're a business owner, is be willing to take the time out of the workday to do that, because the people who can't participate in staff fun outside of hours are typically parents, and oftentimes it is the mom, the woman in the relationship where that especially falls on. And so being able to say, it is so important to me that we have trust and relationships built and forged, and we're going to do that during the middle of the workday. We just did Mythic. Crystal set up a tour of Mythic Press, and we did screen printing of t-shirts. And we took a Friday morning and we're like out of campus and did that for a number of hours. So I think something as simple as asking and then being willing to put the money and time in would be my suggestion. Anyone else?
Sorry, I have to borrow yours. I mean, I could yell, but that might be a little loud. I think also, I don't know if for you necessarily, but for larger companies, I think having specific groups for folks that are not the typical employee is very impactful. And I know a lot of our larger companies over here have quite a few, but if you don't have that, and there are, hopefully it's not just you, but as soon as someone else gets in the door that looks like you should start that and initiate that group, so that, you know, you can have those conversations in a safe place with employees, and you know, if they're comfortable opening it up to allies so that they can have other folks in the room that can advocate for them in the future, that's always beneficial as well.
I would say a key to culture building, like especially as a new co or startup, the first 3 to 5 hires are so critical. Like making sure that that group is either represents a number of different backgrounds or has experiences that are diverse, something that allows them to speak to, okay, well, I haven't just lived in one place my entire life. I haven't just seen one culture my entire life. Even if they aren't necessarily from that culture, making sure that that core team in the beginning is diverse will also then allow them, as the team grows, for those folks to advocate for people that don't necessarily look like them, or people that maybe do look like them if they are from a underrepresented group.
Great question. Any other questions in the room?
Hi. I wanted to know what's the right way that you can ensure corporate accountability whenever you find out that there's a system of unequal pay, that it's not just one person, but maybe multiple people, either from a junior member who just joined on and you're finding out, or if you're all the way up in policy making.
So you're saying if you find out it's happening, what do you do?
Yeah.
Go to the EEOC website and file. I'm just kidding. Well, yes, but also do that. You should do that if it's legitimate. If you have like evidence, obviously, those cases are wild. But if you do feel like it's happening, I would have those conversations, obviously, with your the folks that are telling you those things. Document it, and then if your company has an HR department, you need to file that with HR, because they are typically the ones in charge of pay. So like if that does happen, hopefully they're catching it, but sometimes depending on the company, they may not. So taking that to HR, and then they would start an investigation, talk to the manager. If you don't have HR, you should be going to your manager or the manager's manager, depending on the flow of things. And you could have 2 leads. There, it gets complicated in software engineering, okay? But yeah, starting with HR, or if you don't feel comfortable going to your manager, but if you do, you should have that conversation directly with them.
Also, if you do have those conversations, whether it's with your manager or with HR or director, whoever it is, always make sure you document it. Like, that is so important, whether it's an email, even if you have a verbal conversation, recap it in an email. Hey, we spoke about this. I really appreciate your response and your attention to this matter, and XYZ. Yes. Absolutely.
Yes. Also, making sure that you do all of your thorough, investigating yourself, because, there could be someone that has a lot more professional experience than you, or certifications, or a different degree. So if it's equal to equal, you should have that conversation. But if it's this person might have more things than you can't necessarily have that conversation, because that's what they're going to use. Oh, well, they have this much more stuff in their background.
And again, on the documentation front, when you ask the questions we've all talked through about, okay, if there isn't a salary opportunity now, what does it look like for me to have salary growth in the future? That is another great opportunity to ask your manager to put in writing back to you. Well, what do you need to see in the next 6 months or in the next year? If they're the ones defining the timeline, if they're the ones defining those terms, you want to be able to, at the end of that time frame, say, this is what you said you were looking for, and here's what I have done. And I think, when you can put it in your own words, great, but if you can get them to give you that documentation out the gate, it's even better. We've got time for one other question. Okay, I have been taking notes this whole time because I'm inspired by all 3 of you and about this discussion that is leaving me a little bit more optimistic than when we sat down. And so I wanted to sum up, as we think about takeaways, some of the things that we heard. The first is a plug for OKWIT, if you are looking for professional organizations. The other I will add to that is a wonderful new organization in town called Out in Tech, for those in the LGBTQIA community or that are allies, another great resource group to find community. A podcast is Popcorn Finance, and the book Never Split the Difference, or the subsequent YouTube videos for Never Split the Difference. I love this concept of a personal advisory board. Going and figuring out where do you want to head in your career, who can help you get there, and building the team, so to speak, that's 3 years ahead of you, or 5 years ahead of you, or 10 years ahead of you. Volunteering for conferences as a way to get your foot in the door and to meet new people. Being sure to quantify your accomplishments, as Valerie said, and put the things that you have done beyond yourself and into really tactical terms. And then finally, for our allies in the room, our ask is that you be open with us and be willing to share your experiences, the tips that have worked for you, maybe even so far as sharing your own salary, because it helps us understand if there is a level playing field and how to negotiate if there isn't. So thank you all for being here. We've got some resources for OKWIT, for some of the things happening at Atlas School behind us. We're going to turn it back over to our resource fair for a little bit longer. So if you would love to maybe meet someone new, build your network, take a snack, and navigate through the resource fair on your way out. We're so grateful that you're here and can't wait to stay in touch. So thanks again.